The email hit like a hammer, and my chest went hollow as numbers bled red across the screen. Ethan Cole said, "This can't be real." The ledger showed transfers to shell vendors I never approved. Marcus Vale said, "Protecting liquidity," 2 weeks ago. Now the signatures matched mine, perfect and wrong. I replayed our handshake at launch and tasted metal. Ethan Cole said, "You stole my company." A push alert buzzed, last account drained at dawn. The office lights hummed like a lie detector. I called banking, voice flat, and heard policy walls rise. Ethan Cole said, "Then I take it back another way." In the glass, my face looked older and meaner. Somewhere a printer spat invoices like confetti at my funeral. I drove until the wipers screamed at the glass, then parked by the river where the city hides its shame. Ethan Cole said, "You planned it, Marcus," to the empty seat. The bank rep recited policy like a prayer for sinners, and I counted each clause like gravestones. A gull shrieked, and I flinched. My father once said a partnership is a mirror you hand someone. Ethan Cole said he smashed it and kept the pieces. I listed vendors, shell names, the offshore corridor, the dates that lined up like a parade of knives. I pictured our staff reading the news blast. Ethan Cole said, "I won't let your name be the only story." I called Jordan, and he answered on the second ring with sleep in his voice and worry in his breath. Jordan Reyes said, "Tell me it's a glitch." I laid it out, the signatures, the transfers, the umbrella silhouette at dawn. Silence swelled like a bruise. Jordan Reyes said, "Meet me at the lab in an hour." He had always been the anchor when storms got names. Ethan Cole said, "Bring the audit logs and the vendor list." I stared at my reflection in the side window and didn't recognize the man who wasn't naive anymore. Somewhere in the distance, a siren learned my rhythm. Helen met me in a quiet cafe that smelled like burned sugar and old paper. Helen Park said, "You look like you discovered gravity the hard way." She had that librarian calm that made knives feel like spoons. I showed her the forged consent forms. She traced the margins where the pressure changed. Helen Park said, "He used your trust as ink." She had seen this before, in boardrooms that ate people. Ethan Cole said, "How do I make it hurt without losing myself?" She slid a card with a name I knew from rumors, and my pulse clicked faster. I stood outside Marcus's tower and watched the glass reflect a sky that didn't care. Security guards drifted like sharks in ties. Ethan Cole said, "You built your throne on my hours." I worked the timeline in my head like a lock, aligning pins called leverage and exposure. The plan needed receipts, witnesses, and a fuse. Jordan Reyes said, "I'll pull the logs and scrape the vendors." Helen Park said, "Choose justice over spectacle, but choose." I felt the line where revenge becomes rot, and I stepped to the edge without stepping over. The door revolved. The game began. I sifted through old invoices until my fingertips turned black with toner dust, and every line glowed like neon lies. Ethan Cole said, he built ghosts out of fake names. I mapped the flow, each shell company tied to Marcus Vale like veins to a heart. The numbers didn't scream, they whispered steady, cruel truths. Jordan Reyes said, "Every corridor points offshore, and the screen lit with nodes bleeding into one hub." My chest tightened as the fraud bloomed like a cancer spreading across spreadsheets. Ethan Cole said, "Then I cut the artery." But the screen felt endless, the numbers multiplying faster than I could catch them. Jordan met me at the stairwell, hood drawn up against drizzle, but his eyes carried the storm inside. Jordan Reyes said, "You don't know what this will cost." He scanned the files, jaw tight, lips chewing silence. Ethan Cole said, "It already cost me everything." He turned a page and found Marcus's trail stamped like a brand. Jordan exhaled sharp. Jordan Reyes said, "Then I'm in. But if this buries us, remember I warned you." His loyalty tasted reluctant but real. My shoulders eased, and for the first time, I wasn't alone against the void. Helen poured tea into chipped porcelain, while I rattled off names of vendors that didn't exist. Helen Parks said, "Your anger's louder than your facts." She traced a ledger column with her fingertip, as if reading Braille secrets. Ethan Cole said, "The facts are knives." Helen Parks said, "Knives cut both ways." Her calm pressed against my storm, her eyes steel behind candlelight. She warned me of turning into the man I hunted. My voice cracked when I swore to stay human, though inside, the promise felt thinner than paper. Marcus Vail appeared on a live-stream panel, polished as marble, laughing with CEOs while my stomach burned acid. Marcus Vail said, "Partnerships thrive on trust." The crowd clapped like trained seals. I watched his cufflinks catch light, each flash a taunt. Ethan Cole said, "He wears theft like silk." His tone smooth, his eyes hiding rot, his smile rehearsed until it felt immortal. For the audience, he was charm incarnate. For me, he was a parasite dressing as a king. The world couldn't see the blood on his hands, but I could smell it through the screen. I stood at the bridge where trains screamed underneath, the city's pulse echoing in steel. Ethan Cole said, "If law won't stop him, I will." I reviewed Helen's warnings and Jordan's weary eyes, but rage drowned doubt. I pictured Marcus exposed, stripped, humiliated under the same lights he adored. My reflection in the glass railing looked sharp, almost cruel. The night air was damp with iron, and my heart ticked like a time bomb waiting to be armed. Ethan Cole said, "This is where the fight begins." The plan started with whispers, not thunder. Ethan Cole said, "Every empire crumbles from cracks in its walls." I created anonymous tips dressed as harmless memos, feeding reporters hungry for dirt. Screens glowed with carefully planted evidence, each document soaked in truth and poison. My chest raced as I hit send, the silence of the apartment suddenly loud with consequence. The first reply came quick, a journalist sniffing rot beneath Marcus' polished mask. Ethan Cole said, "One seed planted, one tree poisoned." I imagined his face tightening when rumors started circling, when the world he built felt less untouchable. My hand shook on the mouse, but my jaw hardened. I wasn't a victim anymore, I was the storm he didn't see coming. The pushback came fast, carried on heavy footsteps in a parking lot that smelled of oil and rain. A mountain of a man blocked my path, jaw like stone. The enforcer said, "Marcus sends his regards." His voice rumbled like engines. My spine stiffened though my gut twisted. Ethan Cole said, "If he wants me afraid, he'll have to work harder." The enforcer smirked, stepping close enough for his breath to sting. A warning disguised as mercy. His hand tapped my chest once, like a marker on prey. Tires hissed behind us, shadows shifting under the buzzing lamps. My heart hammered, but I didn't move back. Ethan Cole said, "Tell him I'll return the message with interest." The threat hung between us, raw and electric. Back at the lab, Jordan's patience cracked. He slammed his fist on the desk, papers leaping like startled birds. Jordan Reyes said, "You're crossing lines you can't come back from." His voice trembled with more fear than anger. I bit back. Ethan Cole said, "Marcus crossed them first." Silence thickened, heavy as a locked vault. Jordan's eyes darted over the glowing data, the fraud web twisting across the screen like a virus. His shoulders sagged, torn between loyalty and dread. Jordan Reyes said, "You're burning yourself alive to light his downfall." His words stung, but the fire inside me burned hotter. Ethan Cole said, "Then let me burn. Hell feel the flames." Jordan turned away, jaw tight, unwilling to watch me fall deeper. Helen sat across from me in her candlelit study, hands folded neatly, scars on her wrist visible when the sleeve slid back. Helen Parks said, "I chased vengeance once." Her voice was soft, but sharp enough to cut air. She told me about betrayal that hollowed her bones, about nights she almost drowned in her own rage. Her eyes shone with grief she no longer wore on her face. Ethan Cole said, "I can't let him breathe while I choke on his lies." She looked at me like I was a soldier choosing a war I couldn't win. Helen Park said. Knives don't care who bleeds. She slid an old folder across the table, her hand trembling, eyes silently begging me to turn back before I lost more than Marcus ever took. The city alley swallowed me whole, neon dripping down wet bricks like paint on a canvas. Ethan Cole said, every lie is fuel, and I am the match. My reflection in broken glass no longer looked familiar. It was harder, sharper, almost feral. Each document gathered, each threat endured, was another weapon in my growing arsenal. The hum of a distant train rattled my ribs, and I felt the world split in two, one where Marcus stood untouchable, and one where I would tear him down brick by brick. Ethan Cole said, there's no turning back now. The words didn't tremble anymore. They roared. I clenched my fists, felt the tremor of coming war, and walked deeper into the night with fire stitched into my veins. The first real strike landed in silence, not in noise. Ethan Cole said, truth doesn't need shouting, just timing. I fed the forged contracts and stolen transfers to an auditor, with a reputation for hunting fraud like a wolf. Within days, whispers turned into headlines, Marcus's empire wobbling under scrutiny. I watched him on TV, his smile cracking for the first time, sweat shining like confession. Ethan Cole said that's the sound of fear, even behind glass. The city buzzed with rumors, investors pulling threads from his silk web. I should have felt relief, but what bloomed instead was hunger. This was only the first cut, and I wanted more. Marcus struck back with charm sharpened into a blade. He strolled onto financial news, polished as always. Marcus Vale, said a few disgruntled employees, invent shadows. His smile rehearsed, his tone syrup thick. Investors leaned forward, hungry to believe the lie because it paid better than truth. Ethan Cole said, he sells poison in crystal glasses. His voice smooth, his hands steepled like a king unshaken. But I saw the twitch at his temple, the way his cufflink spun too often. Marcus was covering cracks with gold leaf, and the cracks were widening. The city wanted a savior, Marcus gave them theater. Jordan's voice snapped like a whip across the cluttered lab. Jordan Reyes said, you're becoming him. His eyes bore into me, torn between anger and grief. I waved him off, papers spilling, proof of Marcus's rot covering the desk. Ethan Cole said, I'm not him, I'm the reckoning. But the words sounded too sharp, too close to his tone. Jordan's hand trembled as he pointed at me, fear mixing with loyalty. Jordan Reyes said, when you cross this line, there's no coming back. Silence choked us both. My chest burned, but I didn't back down. The fire was too strong. Ethan Cole said, then stay or walk, but don't block the fire. In the quiet of the cafe, Helen pressed her palm on mine, grounding me. Helen Park said, remember the victim, not just the betrayer. Her voice soft, steady, carrying weight heavier than the coffee between us. She spoke of those Marcus left ruined, employees gutted, families shattered. Her eyes hardened, seeing the ghosts that never left her. Ethan Cole said, their silence screams louder than my rage. She nodded, her lips thinning into resolve. Helen Park said, then fight for them, not just against him. The words rooted deep, but vengeance still pulsed stronger. Justice and revenge, twins in the same cradle, waiting to be chosen. At night, I walked the bridge where steel hummed with the weight of trains, city lights bleeding into the water below. Ethan Cole said, I'll strip him until nothing's left but bone. The folder in my hand felt heavier than stone, every page another bullet waiting to fire. Helen's voice echoed, warning of humanity lost, but my chest surged with fire. I wasn't chasing redemption anymore, I was building destruction. Jordan's warning burned in memory, but his face blurred behind smoke. The city skyline shone indifferent, stars drowned by neon. Ethan Cole said, revenge is no longer an option, it's my only language. The night air tasted like war, and I inhaled deep. Marcus stopped pretending he was untouchable. Now he was hunting me in the open. His enforcer lingered at old offices, tracing the people I once called family. Ethan Cole said, he's cutting away everyone who stood near me. One former employee whispered of visits in the night, threats delivered with silence sharper than words. The enforcer said, end this, or we end you. His shadow hung in every hallway I walked, even when I was alone. Jordan's systems were breached, his laptop sliced open by malware wearing Marcus's fingerprints. Ethan Cole said, he's not fighting me in boardrooms, he's fighting me in the dark where laws don't breathe. I clenched the folder in my hands, knowing every strike I took invited a counter that hurt not just me, but everyone orbiting my fire. The trap was dressed in polish, a banker's call promising cooperation and discreet documents. Ethan Cole said, bait shines brighter when poisoned. I walked into the meeting room, the smell of new carpets and expensive perfume, masking something sour. The contracts on the table gleamed perfect, every corner too sharp, too neat. A guard shifted near the door, his eyes pinned to me like a hawk. My pulse raced, but my hand stayed steady as I reached. The moment I touched the file, his stance shifted to strike. Instinct screamed. I hurled the folder at his face and flipped the table, scattering paper like shrapnel. Ethan Cole said, you'll have to break me, not scare me. I ran the room exploding in chaos behind, and dove into the storm outside where the night swallowed me whole. Jordan was waiting in the lab, face pale, eyes filled with storms. Jordan Reyes said, I can't do this anymore. His voice cracked with grief, but carried steel. I dropped the folder on the desk, papers spilling like entrails. Ethan Cole said, then don't. But I'm not stopping. He slammed his hand down, rattling the monitors. Jordan Reyes said, you sound like him, like Marcus. The words cut deeper than fists. My jaw tightened, silence heavy between us. Ethan Cole said, if you think I'll stop, you never knew me. His shoulders sagged, loyalty colliding with dread. Jordan Reyes said, then may your fire not consume us all. He stepped back, turning his face to shadow, and the bond that anchored me began to fracture. Helen bore the strike I feared most. Marcus dragged her into my war. A whisper from her contact turned into headlines tarnishing her name. Helen Park said, they'll strip me of what little I have left. She smiled faintly, but her eyes were hollow. I wanted to tear the city apart. Ethan Cole said, he can't touch your truth. She slid papers into an envelope, her trembling hands betraying the calm her face wore. Helen Park said, don't let me become your casualty. Her warning crushed against my ribs. She carried scars from her own war, and now I was branding her with mine. Ethan Cole said, this fight ends with him, not you. Her silence carried doubt heavier than words, but I held on to anger as shield, promising her head never take another piece. I climbed the rooftop that faced Marcus's tower, folder pressed to my chest like scripture. The wind howled, the city stretching infinite below. Ethan Cole said, this ends with fire or silence. The skyline blinked with 1,000 indifferent lights, each one a reminder of people who would never know the war above them. Jordan's voice echoed in memory, Helen's face haunted in silence, but their warnings dissolved under the heat of vengeance. My reflection in the tower glass glared back at me, sharper, crueler, no longer soft. Ethan Cole said, I will strip him bare, and when I am finished, there will be nothing left of his empire but ash. My boots scraped the edge, the folder heavy with secrets, my vows sealed not with hope, but with fury. The war was not waiting, it had already begun. The bomb dropped inside a conference room that smelled like cold glass and fear. The auditor slid a clause across the table that I didn't remember signing. Ethan Cole said, what am I looking at? The paper showed I had delegated e-signature rights during a funding sprint, buried in a midnight amendment. Marcus Vale said, you authorized everything when he joined by video, smile thin as wire. My throat tightened as dates aligned with the first siphon. Helen Park said, he baited you when you were desperate. The signatures were mine, legal, weaponized against me. Ethan Cole said, You turned my trust into a crowbar. The room seemed smaller, while the truth grew teeth. I left the building and walked until the city blurred into streaks. Ethan Cole said, maybe I built the trap that ate me. Guilt pressed like a boot on my ribs. I replayed that frantic week, the funding calls, the sleepless night, when I'd sign anything to keep the lights on. Helen Park said desperation is the thief's favorite mask. Her words didn't soothe. They scalpeled. Thunder crawled across a sky that wouldn't break. I pictured staff who trusted me and felt the floor tilt. Ethan Cole said, if I caused the wound, I must close it. The choice wasn't between innocence and guilt anymore. It was between action and collapse. Jordan waited in the lab with eyes that hadn't slept. Jordan Reyes said, I need to tell you something before Marcus does. The words hit like gravel. He confessed that he'd routed one tip to Marcus to stall the enforcer from targeting my family. Ethan Cole said, you gave him my air to keep me breathing. Jordan's shame flared, and then steadied. Jordan Reyes said, I choose you now, no hedging. He slid over root logs, a back door into Marcus's vendor web, and an enforcer dossier with cracks in its spine. Ethan Cole said, then we sever the artery together. The room brightened without changing light. Loyalty, raw and imperfect, still chose a side. We built the strike in layers like armor. Helen mapped the legal timeline to expose the clause as predatory consent. Jordan threaded the logs into a live dashboard that bled in real time. Ethan Cole said, he'll feel the cut the moment cameras wake. We targeted Marcus's gala, where donors loved gloss more than truth. Helen Park said, make the choice clean, not cruel. I rehearsed the words that would pin him to his own paperwork. The plan clicked into place with the sound of a loaded magazine. Ethan Cole said, we end the theater with facts. My hands steadied as if they belonged to someone older and colder. The gala glowed like a lie polished to mirror shine. Marcus Vale said to trust, to vision raising a crystal glass under chandeliers. I stepped into the light as the screens behind him flipped from logos to ledgers. Ethan Cole said, here is your trust, line by line. The crowd sucked air as signatures bloomed, and the delegation clause pulsed in red. Marcus smiled too wide, then cracked. Marcus Vale said, security. My voice cut first. Ethan Cole said, you exploited consent, obtained under duress, and laundered it through shells we can name. Jordan pushed the live dashboard, transactions bursting like fireworks. Helen's timeline unrolled, clean as judgment. For one held breath, the room belonged to truth. The gala floor turned to ice as Marcus's empire shattered in public. Investors whispered, journalists scribbled, and the board members avoided his eyes. Marcus Vale said, these are fabrications, his voice breaking under its own weight. But the evidence glowed too bright, signatures pulsing with betrayal. Ethan Cole said, you built an empire on blood and ink, and it just drowned you. His cufflinks no longer gleamed, they shook. The enforcer, silent in the back, stared down at the floor, loyalty bleeding into doubt. Marcus clutched the podium like a sinking man grips driftwood, but no one was pulling him ashore. His throne was collapsing, and everyone saw it. I left the stage, but the noise of judgment followed me. In the hallway, the world felt too quiet. Ethan Cole said, truth cuts, but it doesn't heal. My chest heaved, not with victory but with something heavier. Helen Park touched my arm, steadying me. Helen Park said, you ended him, but you mustn't end yourself. Her eyes carried grief for wars she'd fought before. Jordan Reyes appeared, exhausted but alive, holding his laptop like a shield. Jordan Reyes said it's over, at least for now. Their presence was proof that I hadn't walked this fire alone. Yet guilt coiled deep, revenge won, but it didn't return what was stolen. Helen's voice grew softer, the mentor slipping into her final lesson. Helen Park said, justice isn't about victory, it's about what you carry after. She leaned against the wall, her gray hair lit like silver in the dim light. Ethan Cole said. And what if all I carry is ash? She handed me the last folder she kept hidden, evidence of her own scars, unfinished battles she chose not to finish. Helen Park said, "Learn from my silence. Don't live in it." Her words pierced deeper than Marcus' betrayal, a reminder that even in triumph, the cost is measured in souls. I closed my eyes, realizing the war might be over, but the wounds had no end date. Jordan lingered behind me, hesitant, torn. Jordan Reyes said, "You scared me tonight." His voice cracked, carrying the weight of everything I had risked. I turned, the fight drained from my bones. Ethan Cole said, "You stayed, even when you shouldn't have." He laughed bitterly, eyes wet, shaking his head. Jordan Reyes said, "You're still my brother, but don't make me watch you become him." The words hit harder than fists, and for the first time since betrayal, I felt something close to shame. I reached for his shoulder, not as a leader, but as a man who nearly lost the only ally who believed. For a heartbeat, the fire inside me softened. I stood alone on the rooftop after midnight, the city sprawling indifferent below. The folder was gone, Marcus undone, but silence roared louder than the crowd ever had. Ethan Cole said, "Revenge isn't victory, it's survival in another costume." The wind whipped my coat, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust. I thought of Helen's scars, Jordan's warning, the faces of those Marcus crushed along the way. My reflection in the glass railing looked like a stranger, eyes sharper, jaw harder, a man rebuilt in fire. Ethan Cole said, "This isn't the end, only the echo." I turned from the edge, leaving the skyline behind, knowing the city would remember him as fallen, and me as something in between savior and monster.